I like to conclude my coverage of the UzChess Cup by looking at the final round game between Hans Niemann and Mukhadin Madaminov. Now let's just check the standings going into this final round. So you can see the two young Uzbek players, Vokhidov, Shamsuddin Vokhidov, 24 years old, and the 19-year-old Mukhadin Madaminov sharing the lead. So it was very, very tight. I mean, realistically, 4 players could still win the tournament. But anyway, let's look at Niemann against Madaminov, because this had quite a bearing on the final standings. And this is an absolutely cracking game by both players. Really interesting stuff. Hans Niemann playing white. He's not having the best tournament. He had that setback of the defeat against Jan Nepomniachtchi. So of course, he wanted to fight back and try and reach 50% by winning this final game. So it's an English and quite a closed position. So with bishop c5, black wants to gain control over the d4 square. And that secures the bishop. Now bishop g5 from Niemann. You could just play bishop e3 here to cover d4. But bishop g5 is quite an ambitious move, pinning here. But after knight d4, black has nice control here. And one thing is that it might be possible to exchange here and play g5 and then push the bishop back. And that dart squared bishop looks rather bottled in. After a few minutes thought, Niemann played queen d2. So I think we're going to have our first think and drink moment here, actually. If you were playing with black, how would you play in this position?
I've seen many chessboards in my life, but when I heard about this one, I was keen to see it for myself. It's beautiful and completely wireless, thanks to an integrated battery and Bluetooth connection. For my edition, I wanted pieces that reflect clarity. When I play with them, everything feels natural. Just me, the board, and the game I love. This is my supreme chess set, the Daniel King edition.
I hope you spotted this typical trick that when there's a pin here, but the queen is here, in fact, black can play knight takes e4. So if bishop takes queen, then knight takes, and this hits the rook. And if, let's say, knight d2, then rook takes d8, and black has won a pawn. So this is the issue. In the game, this happened. Knight takes, check, that's important. Queen takes bishop, and black has won a pawn. That's the game continuation. I'm just going to go back a moment, because black does have another option here. I mean, it seems sensible to take a pawn. But black could play knight takes f3 and g5 just to push the bishop back, break the pin. And I think it's quite an interesting way for black to play. I mean, maybe Niemann was thinking that, perhaps he could bring the knight here and perhaps even maneuver it to g3 or knight e2 and maybe even d4. Don't know. It's possible to play like this for black. But knight takes e4, winning a pawn, was played. And I have to ask the question, did Niemann miss this tactic? I mean, it's a very typical tactic. Or did he just think, this is my best chance? He couldn't really find a way to break free from this sort of slight positional bind and thought, well, at least I'm giving up a pawn and I get some play. I really don't know. Someone would have to ask him, was it a blunder or did he intend this? I mean, it's true that white does have a little bit of compensation here. So perhaps this was his intention. You can see that it's difficult to bring out this bishop. This bishop on f3 is a beautiful piece. And there is some pressure on the centre as well. So let's see how this develops. But basically black is better here. No doubt about it. Yeah, in playing c6, then white just has a little bit more time than black. And white does have some compensation. So c5 hits the queen, and after queen takes pawn, d4, exploiting that pin on the e-file. So white recovers one of the pawns. White's still a pawn down, but there is some compensation because white's king is better than black's. So there are 3 pawns in front of white's king, only 2 in front of black's king. And watch this maneuver now, bishop d1. So Niemann is looking to put the bishop on this diagonal and maybe just get a battery with bishop and queen. And it's dangerous. Now, there were some inaccuracies here. One way of dealing with this threat of bishop c2 and queen d3 is to play this. Bishop e6 and bishop g8. Covering h7. And they're actually... it's hard for white to do anything in that position. But rook f8 played. I'm just going to rattle through these next moves. I think we can see that white does have some compensation here, but black should be better. But it's a very tricky position. If Madaminov wanted a draw, he could neutralise the bishop with bishop f5. And I think this would lead to a draw. So, for example, like this. And the position simplifies. Now, I think that's the best that white has in that position. But Madaminov was still playing for the win. He played queen c5. He's a pawn up. But after g4, I think Niemann has full compensation now for the pawn, because the g pawn prevents black from playing bishop f5 and just takes the queen to reach this diagonal, and black is in massive trouble. So this is now very tricky. There are some nice tricks here. Queen c7 was played, but if queen e6, then queen d2, attacking the bishop, and bishop a2. Very common in these kind of positions where this bishop switches between these 2 diagonals. So queen c7 played. Now if queen e7, then queen f4 escapes. But queen e4 played. Yeah, I mean that's what Niemann is aiming for, this diagonal. Rook e8. Now this is move 39. So one more move to go before the time control at move 40. And this is a crunch moment in the game. Niemann has a choice here. And he thought for some time. He still had, I think, something like 12 minutes for this final move. So he had enough time to really think things through. So the choice is this. Queen h7. It's a nice idea. We'll look at it in a second. Or bishop a2. Now, if queen h7, so this is a forced variation, rook takes, discovered check. King h8, that's important, as king g8 would allow bishop a2 check. Rook takes, rook check. And once again, position is simplified down to an endgame which is drawn. So Niemann would have seen queen h7. It's an obvious move, simple bit of calculation, and he would realise he had a draw. However, he also has bishop a2 check, which keeps more tension in the position, keeps all the pieces on the board. Now, if you feed this into your computer, you'll see that it thinks that queen h7 is just a draw. That's very clear. But thinks that after bishop a2 check, black has a winning advantage of 2 point something. But I was sure that Niemann was going to play bishop a2 check, because although the computer says that black has a winning advantage, however you define that, this is still an incredibly tricky position for black to play. And, well, knowing how ambitious Niemann is, I was convinced he was going to play bishop a2 check. Not that he could see the digits, but I think he would still appreciate that black has a few problems to solve here. So this happened. c5, okay, trying to shut out this bishop and get the pawns rolling. Bishop d5. Now, black's best here is to play rook e1 check and queen e5. And black apparently has a winning advantage. But that takes real guts to play like this, leaving the back rank rather exposed when you've got this rook here, and any check could be fatal. And instead Madaminov played queen e5, and that feels like a sound move, centralizing the queen, perhaps looking just to come back here to drive the white queen away. So it feels like a more natural move. After this, the computer judges this position to be equal. So it just shows how, I think Hans was completely justified in going for this line with white, because it's still extremely tricky. Now he played the bishop back to f3, and that opens up the rook and also keeps the king covered. So it's a very practical move, you could say. But let me just show you one line. In fact, bishop f7 is the best move. So it hits the rook. Rook hits the bishop. So rook e7. Now rook f3. Watch where this rook is going. If bishop e8, there's a fantastic idea for white. Now if the bishops are exchanged, then black has made progress. But bishop c4, absolutely mad idea. So that opens up the rook, and after bishop takes queen, rook check, and white forces a draw. So according to the computer, that is the best continuation. But instead, bishop f3. But after queen e6, that drives the queen away from this very frightening square on g6, and then queen e7, and now Madaminov is starting to consolidate. By this stage, with the results in the other games, he knew that if he could win this, he would win the tournament, because Vokhidov, his rival for first place, had already drawn his game earlier. So black is consolidating. Rook e6, and queen d6. I mean, you've got to step very carefully here. And finally, he gets in g6, shutting out the bishop and giving the king a square on g7. So it's still pretty awkward, but actually Madaminov has constructed a defense. And there we go, little by little, black is emerging. Crucial that the king is on a dart square. So this still, Niemann is trying very hard to find a way in. Now I think the most emphatic move for black here is queen e5, because everything is covered. It's very hard to see how white can do anything here. with that defensive setup. I mean, it's very powerful. And then you can start pushing on the queen side. But bishop f7 played instead, which looks compact. But after rook h8, it's tricky again. Threatening queen f8. Now the rook bounced out. Black is still winning this position. And this is all good. Queen c1, good move. Rook h8. Now watch out for this one again. This is scary. A check. Queen f6. King came back. Now, best is b4. It's actually possible to start pushing. But rook e1 played. I mean, this looks very scary for white. Queen b8. To cover this diagonal. And again, b4 is a good move. But rook e7. It's like Madaminov lost his nerve, came all the way back. And after h4, this is starting to feel very uncomfortable. By this stage, players' clock times were right down. You know, they got 30 seconds increment per move, but not a lot of time on the clock, basically. So this was like a rapid play game. Bishop e6 played. Actually a mistake. And here Niemann played rook takes h6. Well, it's the most natural move on the board. You can take a pawn. Of course, that can't be taken because of g5 check. And you're threatening to bring the queen over. In fact, it's not the most accurate move. Bishop e4, it feels a bit shaky because the bishop is unprotected and, you know, this is exposed as well. Of course, that can't be taken because of queen g8 mate. But still, it feels a bit wobbly. In fact, black can't do anything in the meantime. And after, let's say, well, b4, rook h6 really is crushing. Because with the bishop on e4, that's threatened. And after this, g5, this is beautiful. h5 just cracks open black's king. And this is winning. But Niemann, I think understandably, when you're short on time, you play the natural rook h6. I mean, this looks like black is in massive trouble. But bishop g8 is a great move, breaking the communication between queen and rook. And now it's not so clear, because this rook is shut out in an endgame. So this happened. Queen takes b5. I was actually, when I was watching the game, I was actually really surprised that Hans took on b5. I thought he would just play rook takes g6 like this. I thought this could still be very tricky for black. And now the computer says that with best play, black is drawing. But this looks really scary. I mean, this, for example, is a draw by perpetual. Yeah, I mean, if you play queen h5, I mean, you could maybe play on with bishop e4 as well, but, you know, white has a draw if he wants it. But queen takes b5, I mean, maybe he just thought this was a better chance to play for a win, but Madaminov finds some really great moves here. And I think this was a key moment. Looks like Niemann is getting somewhere. That's threatened. But queen e6, great move. Defending g6 and also threatening queen h3 check. And after this, white doesn't have anything here. So Niemann decided to exchange queens, but this rook and pawn endgame is a draw. Okay, the rook is freed, but black's counterplay on the queen side is just too fast. And after these moves, the players agreed to a draw. So, for example, if king takes pawn, then rook b2 prevents the king coming over, and yeah, white can't do anything there at all. Fantastic last round game, you know, with both players playing for the win. playing uncompromising chess. I mean, there's a few questions I have. Did Niemann see knight takes e4? Did he think this was just a reasonable chance to sack a pawn and play for the initiative? I don't know. And later on, what exactly did Madaminov see in this kind of position? I think this is a fascinating moment. This choice between Queen h7, objectively best and a drawn endgame, or Bishop a2, as Niemann played, very risky, but actually justified because he actually reached the winning position. So great chess from both players. Now, final standings. So that game was drawn, which meant that Vokhidov and Madaminov finished on 5.5. Now, Mamedyarov against Yanyapomnishi, that ended in a draw, so they were both on 5. And Aragaisi defeated Theodorou, so he came up to 5. So there we go, Vokhidov and Madaminov at the top. Now they had a 2-game blitz match basically, and Madaminov managed to win both of those games, so he is the champion. It's an incredible performance. He's 19 years old. He only came into this tournament as a replacement for Sindarov, and the weakest player by quite a long way. He's rated 2586, and yet he ended up winning the tournament. Now, he has been Sindarov's second over, the past few months at the World Cup in the autumn and then in the candidates. So that feels like a really good training event for him, or training experience. He said afterwards, "Honestly, I didn't expect such a result, but I think I played this tournament very well. Overall, I'm very satisfied with my play, and I'd like to thank the organisers, my coaches, my parents, and everyone who believed in me and supported me. I think working with Sindarov helped me a lot. Even after the World Cup, I played a tournament and performed well, finishing second. And then after the candidates tournament, this is my first tournament, and I also played well. I think it benefits me. I help him, and at the same time, I gain experience myself." He also mentioned that he wasn't allowed to use any of the opening preparation that he'd worked on with Sindarov. So it's just a general feeling. Must have given him enormous confidence. So you can see these Uzbek players are just pulling each other upwards. Fantastic stuff. And what a brilliant tournament with 1s and 0s all over the place. And a little bit of scandal and drama as well. So all good fun. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget, my next live broadcast is Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. UK time, where I'll be interviewing Paul van der Sterren and Erwin Lamy about their superb new book on Max Over. Hopefully see you then.